Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Friday, which is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to get chapters from you from either plot. Your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. I will label chapters from plot 1 as season 1 and plot 2 as season 2. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video as well. Please do not send Google Docs. I am looking forward to reading your chapters, even if I can't read them all on the channel. Excuse me. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is also PG-13, so if you're under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last story we heard. The title of this story is Tajiia, and today we are reading chapter 5. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated above and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you're specific about either City of the Ancients or Tajiia and which chapter, so I don't send the wrong one. Let's start. Tajiia, chapter 5, Birds and Dogs. The grackles had already stopped twice before they headed in the woods. Arshwaya felt everything was surreal when the birds landed in the same tree Tajiia had rescued her from. As they headed into the woods, Arshwaya kept her eyes peeled. She glanced over to the grackle that carried Tajiia a few times. She realized that Tajiia didn't talk much. Of course, it could be because they might not hear each other from the different birds. But still, when everyone was on the same eagle, Tajiia still hadn't spoken much, just like the squirrel had told them. She reflected on some of the thoughts that Artur had sent with his words. Artur felt that Tajiia probably would speak more if they all spoke Witch. He specifically thought that Tajiia was translating to human every time she spoke, but he wasn't totally sure. Suddenly, Arshwaya heard loud barking, and the birds were circling. The dogs were interested in a tree not too far from where the grackles landed. Tajiia slid them down to a tree branch, and the grackles flew away. Arshwaya looked down at herself, and she felt herself grow to normal size, and it astounded her that she was invisible. Artur had told her, and she had seen his group pop in front of them after the eagle had landed, but she had never been invisible herself. She hadn't even heard of it for real life. There might be a myth or two, but nothing real and believable. So she glanced down at herself a few more times, and then she held her hand in front of her and she wiggled it. Still, she didn't see anything. She looked down and assessed the situation. She assumed a group of witches and warlocks were in the other tree, which the vicious dogs surrounded. She received these thoughts. Tell them or think to them not to climb down. I'm going to press the dogs against the tree. Arshwaya was confused, but she tried to think to someone in the other tree. She wasn't sure who of the 43 people were in the other tree. She just knew 19 who they were not. She thought of Tajiia Ch, since she had mentioned his name as she tried him. She thought to him that they were there and not to climb down. Tajiia Ch didn't know where Arshwaya was or who they were. He assumed it was her original group, and had no clue that it was just Arshwaya and Tajiia. But he assured Arshwaya that they definitely were not climbing down. He actually didn't know how he and his group were going to get out of the tree safely, much less alive. Then the next few seconds totally amazed and scared him, and the people in the tree with him. The dogs kept crowding to the tree and kept jumping up and barking and growling. Several more pulled away from their handlers and joined the crowd. Tajiia's group could see the fear on each of their faces. Their throats constricted and their hearts pounded in their chests. Then one dog landed on another dog, and the other dog snarled at the dog and bit him. Then there was a huge dog fight that broke out, and the dogs were all fighting each other. The handlers exchanged glances, and none of them knew what to do. The dogfight had exploded into a huge mad chaos. Some of the soldiers were yelling over the barking and growling to get the dogs under control. "We've treed them, so just call the dogs off, and the archers will handle things," shouted a commander. Tajiia's heart popped out of his chest as his group just blinked out of sight. He looked down and could not see himself. He too moved his hand in front of himself, and he opened and closed his hand a couple of times, and he did not see the movement. Arshwaya received, "Shall I make them small too?" Arshwaya just thought, "Yes, please do whatever you can. Do." She was much aghast at the scene below. She remembered Artur saying the dogs were vicious, but this level of viciousness was beyond her comprehension. And even though they were not in the tree where the dogs were beneath, her fear was very high, and her chest was in a lot of pain. She didn't know how she could have protected her group against these dogs. "I counted 7 people," thought Tajiia. Arshwaya thought to Tajiia, "Are there 7 people in your group?" Tajiia thought, "Yes, but I can't see them anymore." Arshwaya thought to Tajiia, "You're about to shrink. Warn your group." Tajiia barely thought the message to his group when they suddenly shrank down. Their hands and arms were no longer big enough to hold onto limbs or branches. They all looked down at the huge dog fight still going on. Dogs were killing dogs, and there was blood everywhere. A handler was trying to get his dogs out of the fight, like the commander kept yelling at him to do, when his 8 dogs turned and attacked him. Other dogs started attacking their handlers, and the horses under the soldiers grew fidgety. "What can I do? What can I do?" Tajiia thought to Arshwaya. Arshwaya just looked at the scene below. She had no idea of anything to do. She had no thoughts to send in reply to Tajiia. Then saddles started slipping to the sides, and some soldiers fell from their horses. Several soldiers were panicking and trying to get back on their horse before the dogs thought they were a good target. Horses were bucking and trying to get away from the saddles and the dogs, and any that got a chance bolted away into the woods. Some soldiers panicked, but others pulled their swords or their bows and arrows, and they started fighting the dogs. The witches and warlocks looked on horrified as they watched the dogs maul the soldiers. Even when the soldiers had their swords and armor, the dogs outnumbered the handlers and the soldiers, because most handlers had 8 dogs, and 3 to 4 soldiers would accompany one handler. So there were over 150 dogs and close to 100 soldiers and handlers. The next thing Arshwaya knew, she was shrinking, and Tajiia magically placed her on a grackle that had returned to the tree. The 2 grackles flew to the next tree. Arshwaya received, "What's going on?" She thought, "I think we're about to fly away. Tell your group to hang on, even if they're tied on." Tajiia did, and they flew out of the tree. The birds landed in a few trees in the woods, and then they landed back in the tree where Tajiia had found Arshwaya. Tajiia wanted answers and explanations, but he relaxed a little while the birds weren't in flight, and he could no longer hear any barking or growling. Then they took to flight again, with the woods shrinking in the distance, and the dogs seemed just a really bad memory. When they landed on the ground, Artur's group wasn't as startled and 3 seconds later they could see each other in their group, and several shouted out, 300, 1,000. Tajiia slid her group down and reversed the spells she had on them. Whoa, exclaimed Tharkek. What just happened? And don't tell me I just woke from a nightmare. Me either, said Joshua, a witch in Tharkek's group. If I ever see another dog again, it will be too soon. I have to agree, said Makroon, a warlock in Tharkek's group. How did we get out of that tree alive? Arshwea put her hands on Tajia's shoulders. And Tajiia is the one to thank. I was just along for the ride. I've never ridden a bird before, but I rode an eagle and a grackle today. Dadin sa, said Ozzy as she glanced at Bollock. Shasiangs, put in Bollock. How many are missing? Asked Ozzy as she started the math for herself. Ozzy, Bollock, Tola, Telka, and Carmise said, Wadi Spa. Tharkek looked around at all the people. Arshwea laid her hands on Tharkek's arm. Tajiia has been teaching math, in which, along with some lengthy spells. Tharkek slightly nodded his head and raised his eyebrows. Okay. Well, what was meant about missing? Missing not here? Missing dead? Missing not here, stated Arshwea. At least that's the hope. But we need more birds. Tajiia, we have to go back. I don't want my people, your people. I don't want the dogs to eat or maul your people. We have, 4 groups left out there? She nervously glanced at Ozzy, Bollock, Tola, Telka, and Carmise. They nodded. Okay, started Arshwea. You 5 are keeping track of people until we get Chancellor Wycart's group here. I'm going to rescue, stated Tharkek. But Artur will need you with all of the people he has, protested Arshwea. No, replied Artur. I'm fine. I've seen the images his group is projecting, and the scenes are horrifying. So the sooner we get the people out of the woods, the better. And I'm hoping the dogs can't somehow sniff out or maul our witches and warlocks still in the villages. We will continue on, and we will continue practicing. Several mentors, and even a few mentees, have used Trasin Sadin, and we will work up to Wadi Achasim. No, protested Raisler. We just used Wadi Achasim. That's how we counted 300 seconds. He turned to Tajiia. What's 10 minutes? Wait, called Ozzy. I want to do the math. Arshwea chuckled. Go ahead. Tharkek looked questioning at Arshwea. Wouldn't you just double the number? Asked Telka. Surely, stated Carmise. 7 was spa. Several nodded. Okay, spa-deen. No, started Carmise. Spa-scene, put in Ozzy. Spa-scene-da-deen, added Bollock. I'm getting this. Arshwea noticed Tajiia looking up. She looked up and saw some birds. She knew Tajiia was thinking with them. Well, Artur, if you're sure, then we will go and see if we can get the rest of the groups. She too felt an anxiousness to get all the rest of the groups out of the woods, and even though she was not in the tree the dogs surrounded, she certainly didn't want to be in any tree in that area. Not that the ground would have been better. Artur nodded. I'm sure. I still have mentors. We're practicing. Even mentees have practiced. 2 blue jays landed, and Tajiia had the 3 of them attached to the blue jays in no time, and off they went. Tharkek was calmer now, so he thought with Arshwea as they rode back towards the woods. They had already used a lot of the day, so Tharkek thought they shouldn't bring the groups all the way back to Artur. They should just leave them in the tree on the plains. They needed to get everyone away from the dogs. Arshwea agreed, but didn't want to leave people in the tree by themselves. Tharkek thought they would still have their group leaders. As they flew, they could hear the barking, and the barking kept getting louder. Tharkek half expected to see a dog fight like he had before. Instead, the dogs were still with their handlers in a wide circle, and archers were aiming into the branches. Soon Tajiia had them off the birds in a different tree. Tajiia wondered why the soldiers didn't even bother looking at the birds. But she didn't think about that long. She didn't have dogs near the base of the tree this time, so she set a different spell for the protection wall. Arrows went up, aiming for the tree, and they hit Tajiia's wall and reversed direction. Most of the arrows had direct hits and hit the very archer that shot them. The soldiers near the hit archers were startled, and they turned to the archers and watched horrified as blood gushed out of wounds and throats and heads and hearts. The soldiers turned and looked at the tree and started fearing the tree. The dogs increased their barking and started yanking free from their handlers, but as they charged towards the tree, they couldn't get to it. They jumped against the air wall. This alarmed the handlers and soldiers. They knew the dogs jumped against something, but they couldn't see anything. They glanced around at each other, and the soldiers pulled their swords to fight the unknown. Then a dog howled in pain as he set off a hunter's trap. Then more dogs set off more traps, though the rest of the dogs growled at the dogs in the traps and growled at each other. But they weren't moving too far from their spots. They just rotated and growled because hunter traps littered the ground around them. A handler tried to go to one of his dogs, and then a trap snapped around his legs. He bellowed in pain and called for help, but everyone was too scared to move because the traps kept appearing. Chancellor Wyckolt looked down at the scene horrified. Even the soldiers moved on. The ground was not safe. He looked over at the mentee that an archer had struck. The mentee's mentor was tending the small wound. The arrow had gone through the sleeve and only scraped the arm near the elbow. But the arrow had poison, and the scrape needed special care. Then Chancellor Wyckolt could not see anyone. He looked down and could not even see himself. He received, "You're going to shrink. Be careful, and the wall is going to disappear." Chancellor Wyckolt thought, "What's going on? Is this Arshwaya?" "Yes, warn your people," thought Arshwaya. "The blue jays left, but the ravens will aid us. We need to leave while there is such commotion down there." Chancellor Wyckolt thought the warnings to his group as he started shrinking. He desperately tried to grab the tree or an edge of bark, but to no avail. Then he saw a gigantic raven. His heart pounded in his chest, and he was having trouble breathing. He didn't remember his size was small. The second raven landed, and then Tajiia magically raised the witches and warlocks up to the ravens. Then Tajiia received, "No, Tajiia, put me on the raven with all of Wyckolt's group. You and Arshwaya need to go on. I will take this group out to the tree on the plains." Tajiia didn't respond, but she adjusted the people as necessary and thought to the ravens the new plan. The ravens were okay with separating and really wanted to get away from the dogs and the noise. Arshwaya received, "What's the group leader's name of our next group?" Arshwaya thought for several seconds, and then she thought, "Chelter." The ravens ascended in flight, flew in a few circles, and then headed their separate ways. Tharkek felt he could magically lift people into the tree, and that with Aryan Taj, that he now knew that Tajiia used for her spell, he wouldn't have to keep them small because Tajiia's spell would keep them small for however many grains she used. After they rode a while, Tharkek thought it would be easier to get the people off the bird if he could see them. As he thought that, he saw Wyckolt beside him. Tharkek looked down at himself, and he could see himself. Chancellor Wyckolt thought to him, "We're tight on." Tharkek thought, "Think to your group to hold on anyway." Tharkek didn't know if he could reverse that spell, but he would try. For now he hoped that Tajiia had a set time, and he hoped they would be in the tree on the plains by then. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 5. What a mess, right? You go to a meeting and then you don't make it home. And then soldiers with dogs are chasing you and your group. And while a rescue is good, it is quite surreal. Remember, they haven't used invisibility spells in a century or so. And most can't do the small spell to become as small as Tajiia can. They showed her at the meeting, dwarf size. And so that's still quite big. And a dwarf isn't going to fit on a bird, She's got them like the size of fleas and stuff. So they're very, very, very small. So Tajiia can do these things. And they could do a small spell, but they couldn't do it to that extreme. So this magic, they know magic. They know spells. They're not exposed to this. So they're looking at all these dogs in this dog fight. They're scared. They don't know how to get out of the tree. Certainly the archers are just going to shoot them and they're going to die. This is their death scene. They're looking down, and then all of a sudden they can't see themselves, and they're looking at their hand trying to look at it. Because remember, Arshwaya was blending them in with the bush, her group. She blended them in, and the group leaders could do that. They could blend themselves up. So they're trying to see if they're just blended in with the tree or what's the deal. But that's not the deal. They're invisible. So this is really surreal to these people. They don't know what to think. And then Tharkek was like, I know I didn't just wake from a nightmare. What's going on? So this is quite a mess. And this chapter it was really intense and exciting. Also, I didn't think I was going to get this chapter ready to read to you today because I kept editing things. I really ramped a few things up, added some, heart pulsations or something, some throat constrictions and stuff like that. So I really ramped a few things up for you. I actually added over 200 words today in just this chapter. Then, of course, I had to copy from my script and paste into my story, which, of course, is better than when I ad-lib. Last week, when I was reading chapter 4, I think I ad-libbed something in, and I don't think it made it into the manuscript or the story. So I'll have to go and listen to the video and see what I did. I hope you're enjoying writing your stories. Don't forget to share them by sending them to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. Even if you don't want me to read it on the channel, I would still enjoy reading it. Join me Tuesday for a writing prompt or some more jargon. Join me Friday for chapter 6 of Tajiia, Desperate Situations. Visit my website, bymichaela.com, and read some character bios. You can meet Laura Banks in Operatives. I spoke about her before in the video about communication and gestures being, she had her thumb, Allison had her thumb run under the sleeve, and Laura was able to get the communication from that gesture. And so I talked about her and the gestures being part of the communication in that video that we did. So you could read about her. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe and hit the bell so we can continue to write together. This is when it gets really fun, where you can just dive into a story. You're starting to know some of these characters. You met Arshwaya and you met Tharkek at the meeting at the tree, and Raisler, those three people came down this spiral staircase, and Tajiia didn't know anybody. I mean, she's just like, she didn't know any of these people. They weren't from her village. She didn't know witches and warlocks were this abundant. It's kind of illegal. So she just met these people. So this is fun. You get some ideas and you create your characters. But as you start writing, then you get to know your characters and you get to learn how they react to things. Of course, it's kind of helpful if you can think of yourself. If you were in a tree and there were dogs, 100 dogs, 150 dogs below the tree, and they were, snapping at the tree, and then all of a sudden one dog lands on another in a huge dog fight. I mean, that's kind of hard to think about in our day and time. I probably would never be in a tree with that many dogs below it. Probably ever, never ever. But you can imagine this stuff and write about it, and that's where we have our fun. And maybe we change some things later on, or maybe we add some emotions, or we add some details. So this is the fun stuff. And that's what I want for you as writers. I want you to have the same fun that I'm having. That's why I'm doing this channel, because I love writing. It's my passion. It's my purpose in life. I just love it. I enjoy it. If I never published, okay, then I'm never published. The dream doesn't come true. Whatever. If there's no movies, the dream doesn't come true. But while I'm waiting on the dream, I'm still writing. And while I don't have books in the bookstore, I can still share what I have with you. And that's why I've created this channel, is to share my love of writing and my writing with you. And I'm hoping that you will enjoy this, and even if you're not writing, I hope that you can listen to this and relax and get away from your stressful day. And maybe your stress at the office isn't so bad as these people in the tree, so hopefully this is a great benefit for you too, even if you're not taking up writing. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. I know I've said that, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.